I was already running late to my son's mother-in-law's birthday celebration when I spotted the elderly man with a flat tire on the shoulder of Route 66. Every instinct told me to keep driving. Patricia would use my tardiness as ammunition like she always did. But something about his hunched shoulders made me pull over. "I'm Martin," he said, extending a grease-stained hand. His clothes were worn, but his eyes were kind. 30 minutes later, his tire was changed, and he pressed a business card into my palm. "If you ever need anything." When I finally arrived at Patricia's Hamptons estate, the party was in full swing. My son Jason shot me a worried look, while his wife Claire whispered something to her mother. Patricia's perfectly lipsticked mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So nice of you to grace us with your presence, Elaine," she announced loudly, silencing the room. "Though I suppose punctuality isn't a priority for someone of your background." What happened next would shatter a 20-year facade and expose the secret Patricia had been desperate to hide from her wealthy friends. A secret that, ironically, I'd just discovered from the man with the flat tire, Martin Calloway, tech investor and Patricia's first husband she claimed was dead. I'd never fit into Patricia's world of country club memberships and charity galas. Since Jason married Claire 7 years ago, I'd been the outsider, the public school teacher who raised her son alone after his father left when Jason was just 3. Patricia Montgomery Wells came from old New England money. She lived in a sprawling colonial in the Hamptons with her husband Richard, a corporate attorney whose family had ties to the Supreme Court. Claire was their only daughter, the perfect culmination of carefully curated genetics and private education. When Jason first brought Claire home during his senior year at NYU, I was thrilled. He deserved happiness after working so hard for his scholarship. Then I met Patricia at their engagement dinner at Les Bernardeaux. She looked at my department store dress and asked if I'd managed to find parking for that Toyota. Before dessert, she'd mentioned 3 times that Claire's previous boyfriend was a Vanderbilt. After the wedding, the slights became routine. At Thanksgiving, Patricia rearranged my homemade place settings. During Christmas, she upgraded my gifts to Jason, with no tags acknowledging they were from me. When I hosted Claire's baby shower, Patricia invited 15 additional guests without telling me, then complained about the cramped space of my condo. I remember when Jason was 10, we saved for months to visit Disneyland. I'd packed lunches each day to avoid the expensive park food. On our final night, I splurged on one proper restaurant meal. The waiter took one look at our faded clothes and seated us by the kitchen. Jason noticed and whispered, "It's okay, Mom. The food will taste the same here." I swore then that my son would never feel shame for our circumstances. When Claire announced her pregnancy, Patricia insisted on throwing a gender reveal party. I was explicitly told not to bring anything. Yet when I arrived, Patricia loudly asked where my contribution was. "I suppose some people think showing up," she said to her friends, who tittered politely. The breaking point came 3 months ago. Patricia and Richard offered to pay for my grandson Noah's preschool, an exclusive academy with a waiting list longer than the Manhattan Yellow Pages. But there was a catch. They wanted Noah on weekends to provide stability. Their version of stability meant Patricia subtly undermining my role as grandmother. I'd spent the past month planning something special, a handcrafted memory book for Noah with stories of his father's childhood alongside spaces for new memories we'd make together. It had taken weeks of late nights after school, collecting photos and writing stories. Then, the day before Patricia's birthday, I received a call from Martin Calloway's office. A mistake, surely. Why would a tech millionaire who disappeared from public life 20 years ago contact me? But his assistant was insistent. Mr. Calloway wanted to meet regarding a matter of mutual interest. When I arrived at his modest office in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, he looked different from the man I'd helped, now in a crisp button-down rather than the stained sweatshirt. "You don't know who I am, do you?" he asked, studying my face. "You're the man with the flat tire," I replied. He smiled sadly. "I'm also Patricia's first husband, the one she tells everyone died in a boating accident. The secret that had been buried for decades was about to surface, and somehow I was holding the shovel." Patricia's 60th birthday celebration was exactly what you'd expect. A catered affair at her estate with white tent pavilions dotting the manicured lawn. Waiters in black ties circulated with champagne flutes and tiny horsters that barely qualified as food. A string quartet played in the corner, while guests in summer linens air-kissed and name-dropped. I'd spent the morning debating what to wear, finally settling on a blue dress I'd splurged on at Nordstrom Rack. My hair was freshly colored to hide the gray, a small vanity I allowed myself. The memory book for Noah was wrapped in silver paper, tucked into my purse alongside the business card Martin had given me. What Martin had told me yesterday still echoed in my head. He hadn't died in any boating accident. He and Patricia had divorced 30 years ago after he discovered her affair with Richard. Back then, Martin was just a struggling engineer with promising ideas but no capital. When tech investments made him wealthy 5 years later, Patricia fabricated his death, more sympathetic than admitting she'd left him for Richard's family connections before Martin's success. "I never corrected the story," Martin had explained. "I valued my privacy more than the truth, until now." He'd shown me photographs, documents, wedding pictures, incontrovertible proof. Why share this with me? Martin had followed Jason's career as an architect from afar. He'd always wondered about the family Patricia built after him. As I navigated through Patricia's party following my late arrival, Claire approached with Noah on her hip. My 3-year-old grandson reached for me, and I took him gratefully. "Mom was looking for you," Claire said, her voice tight. "She wanted you here for the family photos an hour ago." "I'm sorry, I had an unexpected—" "Save it for Mom," Claire cut me off. "She's by the fountain." I found Patricia holding court with 3 women who served on the hospital board with her. She wore a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. "Elaine, how nice you could join us," she said, her smile sharp as a paper cut. "We were just discussing Noah's education. I've been telling everyone how Richard and I are stepping in to ensure he gets the right start." The women murmured appreciatively, eyeing me with that particular blend of pity and judgment reserved for those deemed lacking. "Patricia, could I speak with you privately?" I asked. "Anything you need to say can be shared with my friends," she replied. "We have no secrets." The irony of her statement nearly made me laugh. "I brought something for Noah," I said instead, retrieving the memory book. "And for you, for your birthday." Patricia took the package with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her. "How crafty," she said, setting it aside without opening it. "Noah will be attending Brightwood Academy in the fall. We've arranged everything." "Actually," I said carefully, "Jason and I discussed it, and we thought the Montessori school closer to my apartment might be better. I could pick him up after my classes." Patricia's laugh was like glass breaking. "A public Montessori with Noah's potential? Really, Elaine, this is why we need to take a more active role. Someone needs to consider his future." One of her friends nodded. "Patricia mentioned you're just a teacher." Just a teacher. The words hung in the air. Noah needs the right influences, Patricia continued. The right connections. Surely you understand. Richard appeared with a drink for his wife. Everything all right here? Elaine was just explaining her educational philosophy, Patricia said. Apparently, finger painting at a public school trumps an institution that produced 3 senators. The group laughed, and I felt my face flush. Noah squirmed in my arms, sensitive to the tension. I should find Jason, I murmured. Before you go, Patricia said, her voice carrying, perhaps explain why you couldn't manage to arrive on time. Some people might consider it disrespectful. The tent suddenly felt too small, too hot. I stopped to help someone change a tire, I said. Of course you did, Patricia smirked. Always the good Samaritan. Though it's interesting how these emergencies always seem to happen when punctuality would require effort on your part. That's when I saw Jason approaching, concern etched on his face. Behind him stood Martin Calloway, looking nothing like the disheveled man I'd helped on the roadside. In a tailored suit, with his silver hair neatly combed, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Our eyes met across the tent, and he gave a slight nod. My hand went to the business card in my purse, the card with his private number that I'd called impulsively from the car after Patricia's cutting remarks. "Mom, what's going on?" Jason asked, reaching my side. "Who's this man saying he knows Patricia?" Patricia turned, champagne flute halfway to her lips. The color drained from her face as she registered Martin's presence. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stone patio. "Hello, Patricia," Martin said quietly. "It's been a long time." The string quartet faltered mid-Mozart as all eyes turned to the unfolding drama. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. "Martin," she finally whispered, "this is impossible. You're dead?" he finished, stepping closer. "Yes, that's what you've told everyone, isn't it?" Richard moved protectively toward his wife. "Who is this man, Patricia?" Martin extended his hand with practiced ease. "Martin Calloway, Patricia's first husband, the one who supposedly drowned off Cape Cod 30 years ago." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Patricia grabbed Richard's arm, her knuckles white against his navy blazer. "He's confused," she stammered. "This is some kind of mistake." "No mistake," Martin said, "though I've been content to let you maintain the fiction until now." He turned to me. "Thank you for the call, Elaine. You were right. Some truths shouldn't stay buried." Patricia's eyes darted between us, comprehension dawning. "You?" she hissed at me. "You brought him here?" The weight of all those years, the slights, the condescension, the undermining, crystallized in that moment. I passed Noah to Jason and stepped forward. "Yes," I admitted, "after you made it clear that my background makes me unfit to influence my own grandson's life." "You had no right," Patricia seethed. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I think everyone here has a right to the truth, including your family." Claire pushed through the crowd. "Mom, what's happening? Who is this man?" Martin smiled sadly. "I'm the husband your mother erased from her history, Claire. We were married for 8 years before she left me for Richard." "That's ridiculous," Claire said, looking to her mother for denial. But Patricia's face had hardened into a marble mask. "It was a different time," she said stiffly. "Martin was irrelevant." "Irrelevant until my tech patents made me wealthy," Martin added. By then, Patricia had crafted her perfect narrative with Richard. A boating accident was more convenient than admitting she'd abandon a future billionaire for social status. The whispers among the guests grew louder. Patricia's carefully cultivated image was unraveling thread by thread. "Is this true?" Richard demanded, his face flushed. "You told me he died before we met." "Richard, please," Patricia pleaded, "not here." "Yes, here," I interjected, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. "Where you've humiliated me countless times, where you've made me feel less than for not having your pedigree or your money." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "How dare you make this spectacle at my birthday?" "How dare I?" My voice rose. "How dare you try to push me out of my grandson's life? How dare you dismiss everything I've done as a mother because I didn't have family connections or trust funds?" Jason moved to my side. "Is that what this is about, Patricia? You and Dad trying to minimize Mom's role with Noah?" "We're providing opportunities she can't," Patricia snapped. "Someone needs to ensure Noah doesn't end up like me," I finished. "A dedicated teacher who raised a successful, compassionate son despite having nothing handed to her?" Martin stepped forward. "Patricia always did value appearance over substance. It's why she couldn't see my potential. And apparently, she can't see yours either, Elaine." Patricia's composure finally cracked. "You have no place here," she spat at Martin. "And you," she turned to me, "you'll regret this. Claire, Richard, tell them to leave." But Claire was staring at her mother as if seeing her for the first time. Richard had moved away, conferring intensely with his brother, a partner at his law firm. I picked up the wrapped memory book Patricia had discarded. "This is Noah's history, the parts you wanted to erase. Stories of Jason growing up, of our family's struggles and triumphs. Not prestigious enough for your narrative, perhaps, but real." "Mom," Jason said quietly, "I had no idea they were trying to push you out." "We were doing what's best for Noah," Patricia insisted, but her voice had lost its authority. I looked around at the shocked faces of the guests, the carefully curated audience for Patricia's perfect life, and suddenly felt exhausted by it all. "I think I've said what I needed to say," I told Jason. I kissed Noah's forehead and turned to leave. "This isn't over," Patricia called after me, but the threat sounded hollow. As I walked away, I heard Martin say, "Actually, Patricia, I think it is." I stepped out of the tent into the sunlight, leaving behind the shattered remains of Patricia's carefully constructed facade. The following days were a blur of phone calls and family meetings. Jason was furious with Claire for not telling him about her parents' plans for Noah. Claire was reeling from the revelation about her mother's past. And Patricia? Well, Patricia was doing damage control with her social circle. 3 days after the party, Claire showed up at my apartment unannounced. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. "I found these in Mom's study," she said, placing a manila envelope on my kitchen table. Inside were old newspaper clippings about Martin's early success, photos with dates that proved he was very much alive when Patricia met Richard, and a legal document, a confidentiality agreement with Martin's signature, dated 25 years ago. "He paid her to maintain the fiction of his death," Claire explained, her voice hollow. "She wanted to avoid the scandal of leaving him just before he became successful. He wanted privacy from the press. They both got what they wanted." "And you grow up believing a lie," I said gently. Claire nodded, tears spilling. "Everything about our family history was curated like one of Mom's garden parties, perfect on the surface, rotten underneath." She looked up at me. "I owe you an apology, Elaine. I let Mom's attitude toward you influence my own." That conversation marked a turning point. Claire invited me to lunch the following week, just the two of us, no Patricia, no pretense. We talked about Jason's childhood, about teaching, about motherhood. Real conversation, perhaps for the first time. Martin Calloway called me a week after the party. "I hear Patricia's friends are jumping ship," he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Amazing how quickly social standing evaporates when the foundation is revealed as counterfeit. Richard had moved out temporarily, staying at their pied-à-terre in Manhattan while considering his options. The betrayal wasn't just Patricia's lie about Martin. It was the decades of deception, the careful manipulation of everyone around her. "I never intended to disrupt their lives," Martin admitted, "but when you called from the party, described how she was treating you, it felt like karma had arranged our meeting on that roadside." "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Not for a moment," he replied, "though I am sorry for Claire's pain." 2 weeks later, Martin invited me to coffee. We discovered a shared love of classic films and crossword puzzles. He was easier to talk to than any man I'd met in years. No pretension, no agenda, just conversation that flowed naturally. When he asked me to dinner the following week, I surprised myself by accepting. Meanwhile, Jason and Claire had reached a decision about Noah's education. They visited the Montessori school near my apartment and were impressed by the program. Noah would start there in the fall, and I would handle pickup 3 days a week. "Mom," Jason said after they'd enrolled him, "I want you to know I never agreed with Patricia's plans. I just didn't realize how far they intended to go." "I know," I assured him. "You've always valued what I've done as your mother." The memory book I'd created for Noah became his favorite bedtime ritual. Jason would read him stories about his dad's childhood adventures, and Noah would ask endless questions about when his daddy was a little boy. One evening in late summer, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia stood on my doorstep, looking smaller somehow without her usual entourage of admirers. "May I come in?" she asked, none of her customary imperiousness evident. My apartment, which had always seemed inadequate when she visited previously, suddenly felt like a fortress. I was on my territory now. "Briefly," I conceded, stepping aside. Patricia perched awkwardly on my sofa, declining tea. "Richard has filed for divorce," she said without preamble. "I'm sorry to hear that," I responded, and was surprised to realize I meant it. "Are you?" She looked skeptical. "After what I've done." I considered this. "I'm sorry for your pain, yes, but not for the truth coming out." Patricia nodded slowly. "My attorney says Richard has hired a forensic accountant. Apparently, he believes there may be other fabrications in our marriage." "And are there?" I couldn't help asking. She gave a bitter laugh. "Isn't there always more beneath the surface? But that's not why I'm here." She straightened her shoulders. "I've come to apologize." Of all the outcomes I'd imagined from the confrontation at the party, Patricia's apology had never factored in. "I've spent 60 years believing status and connections were everything," she continued when I remained silent. "I judged you for not having what I valued, without ever considering that you might value different things." "Like raising a son to be kind rather than calculating?" I suggested. She flinched but nodded. "Claire hasn't spoken to me in 3 weeks. She says she's reevaluating everything I ever taught her." Patricia's composure cracked slightly. "I may lose my daughter over this." "Or you might gain an authentic relationship with her," I offered, "without the facade." As Patricia left, she paused at the door. "I understand you've been seeing Martin." News traveled fast, even among the socially excommunicated. "We've had dinner a few times," I acknowledged. A complicated expression crossed her face, something between irony and resignation. "He always did have good judgment, eventually." 3 months after the party, Martin and I were still dating. Noah was thriving at his new school. And most surprisingly, Claire had begun bringing Noah for weekly dinners at my apartment, sometimes with Jason, sometimes just the two of them. Mom made everyone in her life feel like they were auditioning for their roles, Claire told me one evening while Noah played nearby. "You never made Jason feel that way. I want Noah to have that security, to know he's loved for exactly who he is." The memory book sits prominently on Noah's bookshelf now, with new pages being added regularly. Pages that include all of us. Jason and Claire, me, and yes, even Patricia, who is slowly, imperfectly, learning to be a grandmother rather than a director of her family's lives. Sometimes the most unexpected detours lead us exactly where we need to go. Looking back on that day, stopping for a stranger with a flat tire, arriving late to a party where I was already an outsider, I realized that moments of courage rarely announce themselves with fanfare. They slip in disguised as inconveniences, as impossible choices, as the quiet decision to finally say enough. My life has changed in ways I never imagined. Martin and I continue to explore our unexpected connection. Noah spends Wednesday afternoons in my classroom, charming my students and building with blocks while I grade papers. And Patricia? Well, she's learning that family isn't a performance, but a practice, messy and imperfect and real. We don't choose the families we're born into, but we can choose the truth we live by. Sometimes that truth costs us the approval of others. Sometimes it gains us something far more valuable, the freedom to be authentically ourselves. If your story includes standing up to those who diminished you or finding courage when you thought you had none left, share it in the comments below. Subscribe to hear more stories of everyday turning points that change everything. Because the most powerful transformations often begin with the smallest acts of kindness, or the simple courage to tell the truth.